Welcome, everyone. My name is Alex Smetcher, and I'm here with a couple of folks from the PKP Dev Leads. That's Bojana Bokan and Eric Hansen. And we're presenting on our quarterly updates for the third quarter of 2025. This is, of course, the work that's being done by the whole PKP Dev team and in some cases the community as well. So just because there's three of us talking doesn't mean that we're the folks who did all the work. So credit where credit is due. I'm going to start with a quick update on the roadmap. Specifically, just a couple of items here. One is that OJS OMP and OPS 3.5.0 are out. Those came out, I think, a couple of months ago after a prolonged development cycle and a lot of very hard work by the whole team and the whole community. We are currently at 3.5.0-1, and we're hoping that Dash 2 comes out in the next month, basically. A lot of folks are curious about the roadmap to 3.5.0 LTS and clarity around the next long-term support releases. 3.5.0-1 of OJS, OMP, and OPS are not currently LTS releases. The current LTS release is still 3.3.0. We are going to add the LTS designation to 3.5.0 likely within the next few months. We were hoping to do it in the third quarter, but it might be a little bit later than that. When that does happen, then the LTS flag will appear on the 3.5.0 release on the download page, and we'll also do some communications about it just to let everyone know. And that will begin a process of a year where folks will be able to time an update from 3.3 to 3.5 or from 3.4 to 3.5 as they're currently using before we declare that 3.3 has reached end of life. The 3.3 line of releases is now sort of around 3, 4, almost 5 years, I think, old. And while it's running safely and securely, there's a lot of dependencies in it, third-party code that is getting older. We want to make sure that everyone stays up to date and stays safe. So that 3.5.0 release will be your flag to do an upgrade when you get the chance to. So watch for that. We're going to spend most of our time talking today about 3.6.0 and some of the things that are going in to that release, primarily for the Open Research Europe project. So I will jump onto the first of those, which is public commenting, which Eric will present about. Go for it, Eric.
Yeah, thanks so much, Alec. I'm going to talk a little bit about the new upcoming public commenting feature. And this is part of the ORE work that I am kind of taking charge of, including some work on peer review as well. But today I'm going to talk primarily about public commenting. So if we can go to the next slide, I'll share a little bit about what's included within this. And these are just kind of the highlights. And after this, I will run through a quick demo. So first and foremost, if any of you remember the public commenting from previous versions of OJS, they were a lot more open. And with this, one thing we wanted to do was make sure it was much more locked down and more spam resistant. And so it's a very moderation focused workflow. So what this means is that comments first enter a moderation queue and must be approved. And there's tools for other users to report things and, flag them as spam. Only logged in users can leave comments, but anyone can read comments. And in line with the way public commenting works in the current ORE platform, comments are on a publication version by version basis. And of note, this is also a completely optional feature. So it will be off by default. And if you would like to enable it, you can, but it is not something that you have to opt in to use. So if we can go to the next slide, I will then share my screen and do a little demo of what it currently looks like and what some of these features look like. Okay, so to start with, I am going to come here to an article landing page. And over here, we see some of the new features for part of the commenting. There's in the sidebar here, the list of total comments and a way to log in for comments. And this is where the comments would appear. These are side by side and I on my demo install. But if there was more information here, you would have the whole article below and these would be a bit separated. So this will scroll you down to the bottom. You can log in to comment. I'll log in as a user with reader access. And then we can see that I can now add in a comment here. So a just comment. And then it will appear down below. And one of the things you will see is this notice that your comment will be visible when the editor approves it. And as the user, I have the ability to delete my comment. And since this logged in user is the one who created this comment, they will be able to see the comment. But if I log out and come back to that as an unauthenticated user or as a different user, we'll see that it is not there yet. So what this looks like for a journal manager, so this is the back end of OJS, there's now this new sidebar area called content. And some other things are going to move here eventually too, but currently this is where any of the commenting features lives. And if we go to comments, we can see a few different things here. We can see all comments as they ever have existed. We see approved comments, comments that are hidden or need approval, which is this case. This is a comment that needs approval because it's new, as well as any comments that have been reported, which we'll take a look at in just a moment. And you might note that currently there's no way to tell when you have received a new comment and there's something new in the moderation queue for journal managers or editors. That's a feature that's going to be coming in a little bit, but that's not currently in. So the full comment feature set is ready and working, but the way to receive notifications has not been implemented yet. So I'll show you what this looks like in terms of approving a comment. We come in here to the hidden needs approval, find the comment, and then we can see some more details about it as well as the comment itself, if there are any reports, which we'll take a look at in a moment. And we'll go ahead and say, okay, this comment's fine, we can approve it. And if we come back to the article landing page, still logged out, I can now come and see that this comment has been posted. So the next thing I'd like to show is how the reporting feature works. We'll log in as a different user now. And let's say as a different user, I come across this comment and I say this comment is inappropriate, it's spam, there's something else. I can come here and report the comment. There's a little box to explain why. Say this comment is spam, report it. And then that goes to the moderation queue for the journal manager or editor. Come back here, come in here to reported. And again, we'll have notifications in the future, but now we can see that this comment has a reported status. We can go and view that comment. View that comment. We can see that it does indeed have a report. We can see it at a glance here, but we can also view it in more detail and can either delete the report if the report itself is erroneous, and we can decide what to do with the comment. We can either hide it and retain it or delete it altogether. And in this case, we'll go ahead and delete it, and that's that. And that's kind of roughly how the comment feature set works. It's a fairly simplistic in terms of the grand scope of all commenting features. There are no threaded comments. It's just to kind of keep it simple, and it's on a per version basis. And that's it for public commenting. Thanks.
Thanks, Eric. I will jump back into my screen share if I could just find it, and then we'll continue to the next section. Good. Okay. So the next thing to talk about is continuous publication and journal article versions. And I believe I spoke about both of these things in the second quarter webinar, but those are more on our kind of design plans. And so I want to pick up on that and talk about the actual development work that's going forward and give a quick tour of what that looks like. And again, these are two features that are brought forward to our roadmap by the ORE project. But of course, continuous publication and the journal article versioning toolset are of general interest to us and features that the community have long asked for. So thanks again to that project, but this is a general purpose feature set that should be useful to you if you're interested in issue list publication or if you're interested in publishing preprints within OJS. Okay. So from last time, we talked about some of the approaches we were using here. Notably, our approach to introducing a preprint workflow to OJS. We have to be careful with OJS because it's such an established feature set and it works well, but it's very easy for us to overload it with complexity if we're not careful. So we were looking for a way to introduce a preprint workflow that didn't introduce a whole kind of from scratch set of functionality to OJS if we didn't have to. So we were able to come up with a plan that basically means taking the versioning feature set within OJS, which allows for us to publish, version 1, version 2, version 3 if there's a revision of the submission, and extend that to include the preprint needs that we've got by merging it with a new standard, which is the NISO Journal Article Versioning Standard, which distinguishes between preprints and peer-reviewed articles. Just a quick look at the NISO standard. I'll point out a couple of things here. This is not yet a finalized standard. We understand it's coming very soon, but it does have stakeholders on the committee from a number of the incumbents, including Public Knowledge Project. So it's a broad-based design approach that should work for all of those kind of existing systems and should provide for some interoperability as well. So there's just a couple of things I'm going to point out here. One is the article lifecycle stages terminology. Likely, if you haven't been active with this working group, you won't be familiar with these specific terms and especially the abbreviations. And as I say, these aren't quite finalized yet. The version of record term may actually change based on a couple of last minute kind of concerns between stakeholders on clarity. But what our hope is that when the journal article versioning standard becomes finalized and gets adopted in various systems, this set of terms and approach to the life cycle description will become commonplace, and editors will become used to seeing it, authors will become used to seeing it, and especially readers as well. So if it looks a bit obscure and arcane that we're using these terms, especially where the content's published, that may be a short-term situation, and I think authors and readers will become used to this as time goes on. But these are the terms we're using to describe what life cycle, what stage an article is in. And notably, this is what we're using to distinguish between a preprint and a traditional peer-reviewed article. One more thing I'm going to add a little bit later on about this standard here. It shows the approach to semantic versioning. Our current versioning model and most publishing systems out there use a pretty simplistic view of versioning. So if you have a first published version of an article, that's version 1. If you revise it, that's version 2. The Journal Article Versioning Standard introduces a bit more of a fine-grained approach to versioning on top of that, which is to say that there are major and minor versions. So if you have your version of record, version 1, then the author makes or requests a minor revision, let's say a typo correction, you might release a version of record version 1.1 to indicate a minor change. If you then had a major change, if there was something methodological that was needed to be clarified, then you might go to version 2.0. And one of the notable things here that the system, that the plan here decided to do is to start the versions from 1 at every new stage. And I'll talk about that in just a second. But that's what we're using to distinguish between different versions of the article and also to distinguish between the different stages, so a preprint versus a peer-reviewed article. So I've got an example here of what the terminology might look like. Author's original 1.0 would be the original preprint posting. Then let's say the author revised that based on early feedback to a version 2.0, which is a major revision. Let's say it then went through a peer review process to become a published version of record. And that would then be 1.0 version of record. You'll note that the version numbers there restarted. And then let's say there was, well, actually, this is not a good example. We should have 2.0 and then 2.1, but let's say another major revision, then a minor revision after that. The reason for the numbers restarting at a new stage is because the journal article versioning standard includes accommodations for systems where, or for deployments where, let's say, the peer review system is not the same as the publishing system. So it might be that the first author's original versions might be in one system, and then the version of records might be in a separate system. And having to start from an existing version numbering structure would be complicated. So they basically have these restarting. So that's the approach we're going to take. That's more or less what I covered last time, so that's not news if you're following it. But I want to talk a bit about the progress that we've made since then. The basics are finished and merged to main. And so if you want to toy with that, it's all in the main branch of our current applications. There's a bit of so we've been wrestling a bit with the implications of this approach. And actually, they kind of push forward an existing dynamic that we had in the software, which is that we have two entities in the system that we work with. One is the submission and one is the publication. And back with OJS, I think it was 3.2 is where we introduced with a large contribution of code from the Free University of Berlin, we introduced the versioning tool set, and that introduced the distinction between the submission and the publication. Before 3.2, there was just the submission, and that was essentially the article, and your titles, your abstracts, your author lists were associated with that submission. But beginning with 3.2, with the versioning tool set, there was this additional concern of a publication, and that was the reflection in the code of the fact that there might be there's multiple versions, version 1, version 2, version 3 of a submission. So a lot of things that used to be associated with the submission moved into the publication to allow for that content to be versioned. You might have, for example, version 2 might have a different author list than version 1 did. It might have a different title or abstract. And so all those metadata concerns needed to be associated with the publication object and not the submission. And essentially what this means as we introduce the preprint concerns to OJS is that we're further pushing that forward so that the publication reflects a much richer representation of the article, and the submission, which used to have everything associated with it back before 3.2, actually becomes more like a grouping of different publications into a collection. So the submission will contain the various versions of the article and their different stages. So it might contain a preprint and a version of record, but all of the specific details and the content encapsulating that one preprint or that one version of record are moved into the publication object. So we have to be careful because previously with OJS, the entire downstream indexing tool set now needs to be informed about the fact that there might be actually preprints bouncing around the system. So if any of the indexers require only peer-reviewed content, for example, we now have to make sure that we're checking for that. One other change that's happening is that we're going to be allowing more workflow actions that were previously blocked. And if you've worked with OJS, I'm sure you've seen that if you try to look at the peer review stage or the copy editing stage before you've moved through and started those stages, then there's just a note at the top saying that this is not available until you've used it. Some of those restrictions are going to be removed so that you'll be able to work with the workflow on the submissions more arbitrarily. And that's reflective of our need to be able to permit, let's say, a peer-reviewed article to go through the workflow stages maybe 6 months after a preprint has been posted under the same submission. But also it does reflect feedback that we've gotten throughout the system that OJS has in the past been a little bit too linear in its conception of the workflow. Things like we're now allowing, starting in 3.5, for metadata to be edited after the posting of a publication. And we do that with a bit of advice to the editor to be careful with it because they should actually be using versioning to track and publicize changes to metadata. But in practice, they often want to just modify to correct a typo or something that's not necessarily part of the scholarly record and just get it done. So we're continuing to do that with the workflow as well. So one of the things that we tried here with the continuous publication work in particular is we're trying to follow this no configuration approach to the workflow. And I'll talk a bit about that maybe with the screen share showing the OJS install so I can be a bit more concrete. But this is essentially an attempt to wrestle with a long-term problem we have where every time we add a new feature, we add more configuration for that feature. And then inevitably, somebody wants to not configure things, let's say, on a global basis for the entire journal, but they want to configure things on a per section basis or on a per category basis. And so if we're not careful, the number of combinations of configurations can grow out of control very quickly. So I'll do a quick demo of the preprint, and I was also going to show the no configuration approach. So let me just see if I can find the right tab here. This is my local installation. As you see here, this is a little part of the continuous publication tool set that we've added to OJS. I won't click around this, but essentially, this is something that's borrowed from OPS, where it's very common to organize your preprint kind of corpus into categories. We also have a browse feature here in OJS for categories, and so if you're not publishing by issue, then of course you'll have a different way to organize content. In fact, let me just go to that first. If I go into the journal settings and look at the theme settings, there's actually three main ways to organize your content. There's continuing to post your table of contents, which is more for traditional issue-based publishing. There's including a listing of most recent published articles, and that will be more for your continuous publication. And then you might include this thematic browsing area for being able to organize content into categories. Okay, but I'm getting a bit off topic. I was going to show the preprint posting and the way that versioning stuff looks. So I'm going to go into my workflow and look at my active submissions. And let's say we have a workflow that has the journal posting a preprint and then going through the peer review workflow. The way that would look is if you're looking at a submission that comes into the submission stage, this is a brand new submission. You'll see that when things come into the system, they will be in this category organization here called unassigned version. And I think we talked about that last time, but just to review, or in case I didn't go about this last time, this is essentially the workflow telling the editor, we don't know what your intentions are here, that this might become a preprint or it might become a published peer-reviewed article, but we're not sure yet. It's up to the editor to kind of determine as they go through the workflow. If this was going to go through a traditional publishing process, you might send this to review and proceed through things that way. But if you were going to post a preprint early, then you might have this schedule for publication link immediately available at the top. So let's go there and let's schedule it. And this is where you determine what this is going to be. So this is essentially asking the editor, is this a preprint or a peer-reviewed article? And to assign that journal article versioning vocabulary to the submission. We're going to say this is the author's original, as in it's a preprint. We're going to say it's a major revision because that's the only choice we've got here. And then my Zoom toolbar is in the way. Let me just get that out of the way. And we do have the issue assignment tool set here. This is the continuous publication tool set, which basically is asking, do you want to assign this to an issue? Do you want to add it to an issue but make it available for readers early? Do you want to not use issues at all? This is the new set of options available for that. I'm going to say we don't assign an issue and we confirm. Now, I was talking about the zero configuration kind of approach earlier. If it turns out that the editor was using OJS without creating any issues at all, then in fact what would happen is that this entire issue management section here would not be visible. So just by not using the issue tool set, we're automatically kind of informing OJS that the editor shouldn't be asked on a per submission basis whether they want to assign to an issue. And then the other change you will see, I'm just going to skip this to no issue. The other change you will see, and again, my toolbar's in the way. There we go. I'll just view this submission. And we'll see here we have this reflection on the reader interface. So this is actually version 1 of the author's original. So this is effectively a preprint. And we're going to review this to make sure that this lands well before the release of OJS. But essentially, we're hoping that the reader, kind of the scholarly ecosystem, folks will be used to seeing this terminology and they'll be able to recognize that this is in fact a preprint. But if it turns out when we do a bit of testing on this that folks don't recognize that and they really should know that this is a preprint and not a peer-reviewed article, that we may include some different messaging there. But as I say, the journal article versioning standard is a broad-based standard and it reflects the language that the existing folks with publishing systems, including PKP, are comfortable with attaching to their submissions. So we would like to see if we can't stay very close to it, even though it might be a little bit less familiar than just calling it a preprint. Okay, I wanted to just go back to the workflow for half a second and show what happened here. So this did become the author's original when we assigned that in the publishing workflow. And let's say we now wanted to go through and turn this into a peer-reviewed article as a secondary version. What you do is create a new version. We would say we're going to take the metadata from the author's original. There's the only one option here at the moment. We're going to make this a version of record, and we're going to make it a major revision. You could do this right now to flag your intentions to OJS that you were going to go through the peer review process, in which case you would see now both versions here listed, the author's original version, which you can collapse, and then the version of record 1.0. Well, you could do that, or you could just go through the workflow. And at the point at which the editor is ready to go ahead and post it, then they can do so. So it's really flexible for the editor to choose what process they're going to follow. But the important thing is that this content's versioned, the preprint can be posted, and the workflow can continue, 6 months later, a year later. One difference between the community's use of OJS and what ORI is going to do is in the ORI workflow, the author's able to revise the submission and post a new version kind of at will. And that's going to be something that would be tough for most of our community to do in just in the fact that the editor won't expect for something that was published, let's say, in an issue, 2 years ago, they won't expect the author to come back in and continue their work on the submission with a new revision. So there'll be a policy plugin for ORI that will allow for that flexibility, but for the most of the OJS community, we won't be allowing that workflow action. So you'll continue to be able to run a traditional workflow without any trouble. Okay, I think that's all I want to cover on that part of it. As I say, this is continuing to work forward, and our next steps are mostly around just making sure that you can post something as a preprint and then continue with your editorial cues, even though it is posted, being useful. And so what we're doing is we're really distinguishing between the publication status, which is published in the case of the preprint, and the submission status, which is actually active in the queue. So we have to make sure that we have a way of kicking the submission through these existing queues, even though traditionally speaking, OJS considers it to be done once it's published. So we're continuing to work on that part of things. Um, Next thing I want to talk a bit about is searching in OpenSearch. And I've been working on this for a few months for sure. I don't think we talked about this last time on the webinar, so maybe I'll start with the basics. The OJS search engine needs work for OMP and OPS as well. There are a lot of features that are unused or broken. The code is old and complicated, the performance is not very good, and third-party integrations like Lucene are hard to maintain. Essentially, all of this comes back to the fact that the OJS search engine was written with OJS 2.0 and really hasn't been touched much, aside from some minor modernization for 3.0. When we first wrote that search engine, there really wasn't much in the way of options. Lucene was a project, but Lucene is a Java application, and of course, we can't expect most of our community to be able to run it. Um, and there weren't any features in OJS that, or sorry, in MySQL or Postgres that were going to be useful. There was actually Zend Search back in the day. Zend was a PHP native implementation of Lucene. Um, it did not run very well and did not last very long. But essentially, we were kind of on our own for writing our own search engine, so that's what we did. So we do have a replacement plan for 3.6, and this is coded in the main branch already, and I'll just walk folks through it. So we still have the same requirements for OJS that we had, 15 years ago, which is that we need an out-of-the-box implementation that doesn't require any extensive functionality or an exotic stack or anything like that. But it has to be faster and simpler. We don't want to get ourselves back into the same situation where we kind of write everything ourselves. It's too much code, it doesn't perform very well, and before you know it, we have to do this again. The good news is that since we first did this 15 years ago, both MySQL and Postgres have good full text indexes, and Laravel does abstract them nicely. So this means that we can, rather than making our own inverted index coded from scratch in our code base, we can just rely on a full text index that can be underpinned by either MySQL or Postgres, and we can just use it. So that's the solution we were looking for many years, and now it's become possible because the base versions of both of those database systems now do have those built in. And the other nice thing here is that Laravel Scout provides a nice abstraction layer for third-party implementations. Just to introduce folks to that at a glance, Laravel Scout is a Laravel tool set. And we're using a lot of Laravel these days. We're using Laravel for database abstraction. We're using it for migrations. We're using it for Eloquent ORM and a number of other things. It's quite a good tool set. And the more we can kind of standardize on Laravel, the more that folks who come from that ecosystem, which is quite a large dev ecosystem, can jump into OJS and understand it. But Laravel Scout specifically is a search engine implementation, which has backends for Algolia, Mealy Search, TypeSense, MySQL, Postgres, many different drivers that implement backend searching with a consistent single interface to be able to work with it. So that's what we chose for our abstraction layer. And I'm just going to give a quick tour of what that looks like. So even though Scout comes with backends for these different drivers, we weren't able to use those directly. So in fact, we ended up implementing our own drivers for the built-in database backed implementation and one for OpenSearch, which is our requirement for Open Research Europe. Even though those do exist in the Laravel Scout kind of tool set, we had some requirements that required us to code our own. But the good news is that the existence of that standard abstraction layer of what Laravel Scout provides, and then the better underlying tool set in MySQL and Postgres, means that even though it is a custom implementation, it is very simple and it is standardized so that you can come in with a bit of experience with Laravel Scout and write your own backend. So if I go into the shared library into classes search engines, you'll see that there's now a database engine and an open search engine. If I look at, let's go into OJS and go into the configuration template file and look at the search section, there's now a new driver setting where you can choose between database and open search. By default, it'll use database. It'll come working out of the box. You won't even have to know that it's changed implementation. And then if you're using OpenSearch, then you can enter your configuration here. And really, this is it. If you just change the configuration to support OpenSearch and then re-index your database search engine with the command line tool, or when upgrade happens to 3.6, that'll happen out of the box, it'll just start working. And if you look at the search engine in OJS, um, essentially, if you go into search and you look for, let's say, theory, it just works. So this is not going to look any different to end users than it used to in OJS. We already had these published before, published after options. There are some additional options for querying based on keywords. If you want to add a keyword, for example, to the URL. I don't think this keyword exists in the system, so you'll see it doesn't list anything. There are some options there, but those are for folks who want to tinker with them. The out-of-the-box search engine here just works the way it did before, only it works much, much faster. One of the things that we had to do in I think it's in the 3.3 minor build, or at least in 3.4, and we still do get questions about this on the support forum, is we remove the author index. And the reason for that is because that was getting hit by search engines. That was then channeling a lot of indexing operations through the search engine, and it just caused the whole installation to bog down and fail because of the server demand of that functionality. Those sorts of tools, we haven't added an author index again, but if we did choose to, and it was backed by this new feature set, it would simply work. Um, okay. I want to spend a minute on the OpenSearch search engine. For folks who aren't familiar with this, I'm not very familiar actually, but my understanding is that um, what's the other search engine? Elasticsearch. So essentially, Elasticsearch is a package that uses Lucene in its own backend. So it includes integration of Lucene, but it includes a bunch of additional features on top of that. At some point, there was a licensing fight in the community about I read this through and I forgot the details, but I believe it was a commercial relicensing that happened to that project, and it forked. And so there is still Elasticsearch, and I still hear folks talking about Elasticsearch, but actually, it looks like most of the community has gone behind OpenSearch, which is the open side of that fork. So I think it's a bit like with MariaDB and MySQL. And I've been using this just for the sake of this integration, but it's quite a nice tool set. There's a whole dev dashboard. There's a feature set for managing and merging logs, which we're going to look into for other reasons. But essentially, you can use a JSON query language, which is a bit to get your head around. And then you can use that to search and get JSON results. So this is what it looks like when you search, in this case, our ORE testbed corpus. We've got an indexing of titles of the abstracts in different languages, of the text bodies. If I'd included PDF extraction, those would be there. Author lists, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you can imagine everything you see listed here would be possible to then construct a rich search for and then get results. It includes a lot of other functionality that will be just working out of the box. Like if you want to, you can define your priority of matches. So you can say, I want matches of a piece of text in the title to be ranked extremely high, but I want matches in the body text to be ranked a lot lower. So then, rather than having, like in the old days, a really advanced search form where you say, I want to search for this text in the titles, but not the bodies, you'd actually just have a plain language search where you say what text you want to have, and then the quality of results comes back in a way that supports those results being better rather than having to construct a really specific query. All right. And if I look at the implementation of those two engines, just to give a quick glance, actually, the Scout project has a good summary of this. If I look at the custom engines area of Scout, this gives you at a glance what the functions are you have to implement in order to create your own engine. So it's very simple. If you want to update the search engine, you can expect to be passed in a set of models. Those are publications in the case of OJS. If you want to then search, then you have a query builder, which looks a bit like the database query builder for Laravel. It's quite good. And then that's more or less it. There's a few additional details here around deleting records and pagination and so on. So if I then look at the OJS implementation for those, and I say OJS, but this also goes into OMP and OPS. We've got our database backed engine. This is the built-in one that folks will be using if they don't have OpenSearch. And essentially, if I look at the index function, we're using jobs to do this, so it's not coded right here. This is just so that it doesn't perform poorly. But if you want to look at the query building language, here it is. This just basically constructs a database query into the built-in OJS database that looks for those various bits of query. If I look at the OpenSearch implementation, it's actually a cleaner implementation because it does have this external data set rather than the built-in database. If I look at the update function, this is where this is the code that will get run when you have a new submission that needs to be updated in the index. We basically take and we map all the various elements from the OJS metadata set into the search query. So here's, for example, where we map the titles in, and then we post that to the OpenSearch client using a PHP implementation that's available from OpenSearch. Likewise, on the search side of things, I can build a query that basically extracts data from the OJS, from the search form into a JSON representation, which is, as I say, it's a query language, so it's a bit of a thing to get your head around, but it's not too complicated. So essentially, this is what one, two, three, four, five, six different pages of code that implements the entire indexing and searching tool set for OpenSearch. And it's a nice, clean abstraction layer thanks to Laravel Scout. And yeah, I'll show in a second what that looks like when it's working with another example, which comes from this subject here, the Frascati vocabularies and keyword vocabularies. I did talk about this last time, so again, I'm picking this up and moving it a bit further. It's been a long-standing feature request that we be able to implement controlled vocabularies for things like keywords and subjects. And this is thanks to the Craftaway project and the folks at TSV in Finland. This came with 3.5 and it's being pushed further in 3.6. And so Frascati is just an example of a vocabulary that's supported by this. I think I have the Frascati vocabulary open here somewhere. Essentially, it's a two-level vocabulary. At the top level, we've got the main subject area, natural sciences, engineering technology, medical and health sciences, etc. And then on the right-hand side, we've got a bit of subcategories here. So within natural sciences, we have mathematics, we have chemical sciences, we've got biological sciences, etc. And then there's this numbering system here, 1.1, which is indicating that we're in the natural sciences category, but we're refining it further to get to mathematics. So it's a two-level structure. The progress that we've got here is to add an integration with the OpenSearch to add faceting. So previously, if I just look at the keyword list here, not keywords, actually subjects, the Frascati plugin adds this button here to allow for us to select subject areas here. And we've got the main heading area here, and then within that we've got the subheading areas. So we might choose, something from a couple of different main heading areas. We'd be able to then save that set, and then that would then give the author or perhaps the editor the chance to use a fixed vocabulary as opposed to entering the usual free-form keywords, which I've currently got allowed, but those could be restricted if the plugin wanted to do so. Right, so what's new this time around is that we're also implementing faceting using the OpenSearch engine. So if I go into the Frascati plugin, which I think is over here, we have a couple of additional hooks here. So these are the old hooks that allowed for the vocabulary to be presented to the user when they were selecting subjects. But now we've got this additional set of 3 different hooks here. And not to go into this in great detail, but essentially there's one hook here that is called when the submission is updated in the index. And this basically takes the Frascati keywords and tries to identify what the base of that keyword is. So what that means is, if I go back into the right tab, if we'd selected these Frascati subjects, we want to add faceting so that you can browse by the heading. So natural sciences and engineering and technology in this case. So we effectively have to map from the detailed points down to their main headings. So because we don't have those indexed, we want to be able to performantly give a chance to browse by those. What we want to do is we want to index in the OpenSearch engine a new field called Frascati bases that captures a list of those bases. So I think if I look in the Laravel Scout, in the OpenSearch dev toolbox here, you'll see here that we do have the Frascati subject areas, the specific ones, but we also have the base area. So medical and health sciences come from this main medical and health sciences heading. What we can do is, if we index those, we can then generate a list of links here that use that faceting tool set and the OpenSearch indexing to be able to give a browse list from that main heading. So that was possible to add just with a couple of hooks here. We've got the hook to update the index. We also have a hook here to augment the uh, the builder object with something from the request, which is to say, if I add the Frascati bases request variable to the incoming request, that maps into the Scout query builder. And then on the implementation side here, we look for that element from the query builder. We map it into something in the JSON query that goes to OpenSearch. And that's all that's required to do this additional faceting. All right. I think that's all I want to say for those subjects. So I'll pass it on to Bojana next to talk about credit in Node.js. Go for it, Bojana.
Hello, thanks, Alec. Can you move to the next slide? So I just want to mention that credit, the contributor role taxonomy support is now in the core, thanks to the Craft OA project. Credit is 14 role taxonomy that describes key types of contributions, and it's available in a range of languages. And more information you can find on that link. And how this all looks like in Node.js is when you edit a contributor, you will have a new part for the credit roles. You can add roles, several roles, and you can also define the degree for the role. There are 3 types of degrees. They will be then displayed on the article landing page together with the author informations. And they will be also considered in indexing services, but currently only in export to chats. I think Crossref and DataSite are also considering integrating it, but it's still not there. So we will follow that and provide them in other services as they come. So this is mainly it for the credit roles.
Sorry, just getting my audio back. Thanks, Bojana. And I think that's the end of the presentation. So I wanted to jump over to the QA tool and invite folks to use that to ask any questions. There's a couple of questions here already. And I think I'll tackle the bottom question here first from Ronald Steffen. Will it be possible to start a new review on a submission that's already published as a version of record? For example, like in the Living Handbook? Yes. So our next steps are very much to unlock some of the workflow that currently is behind rules around what should happen in what order. And what we're going to do is we're going to give a lot of discretion to editors to basically undertake their own workflow. We may have, warnings or guidance where we suggest a certain course of action, like we do in editing metadata on published records. But where previously that was a restriction and now we're adding a warning or an indication, we are not going to be blocking that sort of thing from happening. And the idea there is very much along the lines of what I was describing around zero configuration workflow, where we don't want to get into a situation where we're having to add a whole ton of settings that are going to be complicated and tough to maintain, where we might just give the editor discretion to undertake a workflow that they like. So yes, that should be possible. Currently, a lot of that stuff is blocked in the main branch because we simply haven't gotten to relaxing those yet, but that is one of my next steps is to allow that sort of thing to happen. So yes, that shouldn't be a problem. The other question was from Martin. As a web editor of a journal, I would never enable the comments feature if there's not a spam filter applied before a comment would reach the editor. Is there anything planned in this direction? I remember the times of OJS 248 where there was a comments feature and it was used by spammers a lot for journals that turned on commenting. Yeah, so there isn't any ability for an end user to post a comment without moderation. When a comment comes into the system, it goes immediately into a moderation queue. But it's not made visible until the editor or somebody with access to that content tab actually comes in and makes it available. So there is no pathway to spam being directly posted. Now, I do know that there's some spammers out there that just look for any kind of a form and enter content into it and don't really care about whether it's going to appear anywhere. We may have to add reCAPTCHA, for example, to this form as well if that's a problem that we see out there in the wild. But there isn't a way for someone to post comment with content without some sort of moderation. We did talk about this quite a bit internally. There's third-party commenting tool sets like Coral is one of them, I think, and of course, what's the other one that used to be used quite a bit out there? We thought about integrating one of those because of this issue around moderation and content management. It can be very involved, and we didn't want to recreate the wheel by starting from scratch and having to, make this really in-depth moderation system. None of those was easy for us to integrate. They all used quite a different tool set, and the integration would have felt clumsy in part because it's, tough to brand and style third-party content within, OGS's framework and things like that. So we ended up doing an integrated approach using, eloquent models, for example, for the comments. But one of the choices we made is to keep things very simple. So things are safe for spam. There's a very simple content model for moderation. And we don't expect we're going to see the same kind of situation with 3.4 where folks could, when it was enabled, just post comments without any kind of moderation at all. And we put the workload on the editor. Yes, that's absolutely true. And we think that a lot of folks will choose not to enable comments in the first place because of that. What we've seen out there is that the idea of having comments on published articles is a nice idea, but for a lot of folks who use that with OGS, for example, they turn on commenting, it wouldn't get used. There's a list of 0 comments on the published article, which looks like nobody's reading it, and then it would get hit by spam. So I think for most users, they simply won't enable it. And then for those who really want to work with content and want to work with the community curation to encourage folks to participate in that kind of post-publication commenting, that's community management, and they'll have to take on that work. But yeah, I agree with you. I think for a lot of folks, they won't want this, and so they just won't enable it. I see a couple comments in the chat. I don't know if there's questions there. A couple that have been commented on, it looks like. Other questions are welcome. And I know there's a lot of questions about, let's say, upgrades in LTS. If folks want to ask on that subject, even though it wasn't a major thing that we spoke about today, that's welcome as well. Give it another minute or so. And Martin, I'm curious, given your questions about editorial and commenting workload, um, if you have a use case where you want to curate a community, but you don't want the editors to take on the workload of moderating the comments, I am curious how that'll work. Back in the days of, I'm going to out myself here. As an old person who used to be in tech communities, I used to read Slashdot, for example, and then there was an alternative platform that launched to try to address this community issue around toxicity, for example. Um, uh, it's hard to run communities online, and especially public-facing discussions without that sort of thing. And our choice was simply to make that the editor's work if they want to take it on. But I'm curious what other options there, whether there's other approaches to community curation and stewardship, I guess. Question, is there any improvement in security? So we do see folks on the support forum posting about security issues, and whenever we see that, we do engage with it very closely and carefully because we want to make sure that the software that people are running is safe and secure. And as far as I'm aware, and I do watch this very closely, the current releases of the software are safe and secure. A large portion of our community is out there running older versions of OGS, though, and those sometimes do have security issues. We fix those as soon as we can, and then we release a new version with a security issue that we patched and fixed, for example. But it really is up to all of the folks out there running OGS to make sure they stay current. I know upgrading from, let's say, 3.3 to 3.4 to 3.5, those major upgrades can be complicated, and I know folks will want to schedule those to minimize disruption with editors, for example. But If you're running 3.3.0 dash something and you're not running the latest 3.3.0 dash something, that upgrade within a major release of OJS should be quite quick and easy to do. And I really do encourage folks to do it. I occasionally do get a post on a forum saying, hey, this weird thing's happening. Um, I'll put some time into making sure I understand the problem, and it sometimes turns out that it's just because they're running an older version. It helps us too if you do stay up to date, because then the discussion on the forum tends to focus around current issues and less on historical issues. So the current releases of OGS are safe to run, and we put a lot of effort into making sure that stays the case. But if you're running an older version, you may be at risk. Are there any plans to triple blind reviews? No, not currently, actually. We're seeing more interest in open and transparent workflows, which is actually towards, more open reviews and disclosure of author editor identities. Triple blind's kind of in the opposite direction, but I am curious about triple blind reviews. We have structures in place that would be able to support that, but we don't have any plans to implement it at the moment. Looking for, oh yeah, Martin just clarified. He was referring to spam messages having to be filtered by an editor. So some system is needed in front of the editor. I don't know any. Yeah, I think I mentioned this earlier. We don't currently have it in place, but I could imagine we could well do this to add a reCAPTCHA. We have actually in user logins and registrations, and one other place I think we have reCAPTCHA and ALTCHA. And ALTCHA is an alternative to reCAPTCHA that is it's more of it's less googly, and it's a little bit more available to folks, for example, in China who can't use reCAPTCHA. We could expand our use of reCAPTCHA into and ALTCHA into things like the commenting, but we haven't done that just yet. It's quite a quick addition, as Eric's just pointing out. There's a question about which versions are the Frascati and Credit's plugin plan to come out in. So Credit is available as a plugin in 3.3, 3.4, and 3.5. That's just for the credit terminology, but it doesn't have the credit degrees of contribution, which Bojana just demonstrated. That'll be included in 3.6, not as a plugin, but as a built-in feature. The Frascati and the chance to limit your vocabularies to plugin-based vocabularies, that's available for 3.5 and 3.6. TSV in Finland coded that work for 3.5, and we're extending it a bit further in 3.6 as well. So once you're at 3.5, that'll be possible. I believe that's all the open questions. Folks are welcome to add additional questions. Maybe I'll wrap it up there. Thanks for joining us. Again, if you do have additional questions that didn't get answered, or if they come up after we're off the call, the support forum and the YouTube channel where this video gets posted are great places to add those. I would like to thank the whole PKP dev team. As I say, this is work done by the entire team and not just by the few of us who happen to be here presenting, but also the broader community. And I want to give particular thanks to the folks involved in the Craft Away project, Open Research Europe. Those sorts of partnerships and collaborations really allow us to move forward on features that folks have wanted for a very long time. I know that a lot of folks have struggled with the OGS search engine. They've struggled with waiting for us to get around to things like open reviews and the preprint workflow and continuous publication. All of that's happening now thanks to those collaborations. So huge thanks to all the folks who are working with us, the translators. I'm very excited to have us add that LTS stamp to 3.5. We're still doing a bit of cleanup on 3.5 around things like performance for larger installs that are we're having to put some polish onto it to make sure that it's ready for those folks to migrate. Once the LTS stamp goes on, that's your ticket to jump onto it and start moving. And you'll find that it's quite good. It's a lot of new code there, a lot of modernization, and it's going to be a good basis for us for the next 3 to 5 years. So watch for that, and we'll make sure it's communicated widely. And then I will work with all of you on the forum to make sure you get through those upgrades and all those various steps that come next. So thanks for joining us, and we'll catch up with you in December. I think the next one of these is scheduled for December 15th or 18th, one of those two. So watch for that. Thank you very much, and take care.